a lot of investors when they want to learn about how their money is going towards these initiatives. So it is quite crucial nowadays to talk about ESG when it comes to decision making on investments. Generally speaking, when we say a company has an outstanding performance, of strong ESG company, we're saying, they're environmentally conscious, they check on the resources being used, they check the carbon emissions. They also talk about innovations of how to reduce environmental wastage. When we talk about social, we're talking about workforce diversity, we're talking about human rights, maybe even education, as well as community outreach, right? And when we talk about governance, now that part is talking more about the board of directors, how many women are on the board, what kind of corporate social responsibility initiatives they have running, and policies to ensure that they maintain and sustain the growth of the company. Now, a lot of, ESG scorings would come from indices such as Refinitiv or MSCI. So these are some of the things that we're going to look out for, but in today's conversation, we're going to go a little bit further than just these broad topics of what is an index, right? Now, also as a brief introduction to those who do not know what AQUMON is. Well, AQUMON is actually a digital wealth management platform. And so we're an award-winning wealth tech company. We leverage on all the different technologies such as big data, algorithms, machine learning to make next generation investments much more simpler, smarter, and accessible. You guys can always check out our apps on the app stores if you're interested. Basically, we also make ESG investing a lot easier. So a brief overview of what is happening with ESG investment trends. As you guys can see on the chart, there has been an overwhelming amount of money flooding into the ESG market, right? We had a 9% growth just in Q4 of 2021 itself. And right now, by the end of last year, it's $2.74 trillion that's been allocated in terms of funds flowing into global sustainable initiatives. And just last year, I would say, actually, no, just Q4 itself, there's 266 new sustainable funds being launched. Now, this calls into questions a lot of things. We will go a little further in the conversation, like how do you know a company is good in terms of ESG? Is it just the indices? Is it a fair assessment? Is the data, the quality of data decent enough for us to make these assessments? So actually, what we're talking about in this upcoming panel will reflect directly on how the movement of ESG will continue to grow in the coming years. And now just a brief touch point, if you guys are interested in understanding or looking into a little bit more about ESG investments yourself. So through AQUMON's algorithms, what we've managed to do is we've actually broad-based categorized all the different factors that go into ESG. And we've actually rated them against the company's performances to kind of come up with our own definition of whether or not a company is ESG positive and ESG sustainable. And through that, we have placed them all within two of our ESG portfolios, A Better World, where you can see it on our app. And as you can see, we're talking about sustainable growth. So you can put socially positive companies alongside with your investment returns. And we also have an ESG ranking for all of the Hong Kong listed companies. So if you guys are interested in looking into it, check out this portfolio. It's got 30 different stocks with high quality ESG factors. And here, there's a little reminder. If you do download the app and become our investor, you will receive $200. So this is me done with the AQUMON side of things, and we will go into directly the panel. So why don't we first start off with maybe Andrew could give us a bit of an overview of what's happening in the company, what you guys do, what's the mission, what's the philosophy behind it. Thank you. Passing it over to Andrew.
Sure, thanks, Caroline. Thanks, everyone. It's really exciting to be here. Yes, I'm Andrew. I'm an urban farmer, and the journey started 10 years ago. So my past life, I guess, starting with this social entrepreneur journey. Before that, I spent about 10 years in public services, in business operation, but also I think my last job before, I'm looking into real estate asset management for a sustainable development project in China. And we're trying to implement sustainable development concept ideas with great designers, from this region to try to build the project as a commercial real estate project in China. My biggest challenge 10 years back is just before ESG, before UNSDG, before all the conversation about impact. And I was having a hell of a time to communicate that to the local government, but also to communicate with our contractors, in the tender document, with the property management company, how to be able to manage and operate such design or with all the sustainable development elements project. And I guess that is really an aha moment. Encouraged me to explore further, to say, okay, finding a service provider actually is so hard, and that is so critical in order for any impact-driven idea, thoughts to be able to implement and sustain. And I think that is also what drives me to start urban farming, to look into how we can integrate ecology with the built environment. So this is the journey leading towards Rooftop Republic. And what Rooftop Republic does is really very simple. We identify idle, underutilized asset or urban spaces in city, which are of great values economically, actually, but they are idling, right? So we put in ideas to mobilize the community around it, to mobilize the stakeholder to join in together and transform those idle spaces into productive farms. And those farms would then become an element of change among the community, where we can source locally from the farmers. We can give employment, train retirees, underprivileged communities to work on the farm and provide job opportunities for them. And also we link up with food banks so that we grow food to provide fresh veggies to the underprivileged communities or other NGOs that is cooking a great meal to someone who can't afford it. Yeah. So this is just primarily what we do. But I think in that journey, we also discover that more and more we are able to work with developers to start envisioning how we can design or rethink the future of sustainable living or city living should be, and how to have that harmony, integration between ecology, built environment, and community, as such that we have a model around that. So with this, I end here about 2 minutes and pass back the time to you guys, and looking forward to our chat.
Yeah, thank you so much, Andrew. So up next, we will have a bit of an introduction by Cintia Nunes, co-director of the Mills Fabrica. So please, Cintia, tell us what you guys do, what's the mission and philosophy behind it.
Thank you, Caroline. So thank you for the invite, and so lovely to see a few friends on the panel as well. So I'm Cintia, co-director of Mills Fabrica. So I guess many of you in Hong Kong may or may not have been to the Mills Institute one. So it is an innovation and sustainability-led project by the Nanfeng Group, and we were founded and launched in 2018. Now, this project actually has 3 core pillars. One, which I guess, a lot of you may have been, which is the shop floor with, a really selective mix of tenants that actually follows by a few ESG frameworks. So a lot of the shops that you see there are very sustainability led and also innovative. And then there's the second pillar, which is actually a nonprofit culture institution, which is CHAT, the Center for Heritage Arts and Textile, that commemorate the legacy of the Nanfeng Group as we began as a cotton spinner at the time. So that does a lot of, provides a lot of educational programs and community engagements, workshops to the community, and brings back kind of the legacy of the textile and manufacturing industry back in the heydays of Hong Kong, and then kind of turn that into a lot of contemporary arts and design work, and kind of have that as an exhibition, galleries, and also programs. Now, Fabrica, which I'm a part of, is the innovation arm of the Mills. So what we do, we are an impact fund. So far since 2018, we have invested in around 20 startups, and they're global. So we are geographically agnostic. As you probably know, as an investor, we are all over the place. We welcome any good deals. So we go out at a lot of outbound deals, of the world, to kind of find the best innovations in the world to make an impact. Now, what that means, I can share a little bit about that later, but the 20 startups that we invest in are early stage startups. So from seed to around Series A, B rounds, each ticket size ranges around from a few thousand US dollars to 3 million. We also invest in funds. That means we could tap into a lot more startups with a lot of expertise. So besides the fund, we also have an incubation program that, a lot of times we believe as an investor, perhaps, we could stretch a little more in providing our support in, say, for example, connections, advisory, and as well as media exposure, so that we can support the growth of these startups, as we believe as they grow, which means our impact will grow. And so then when I say impact, a lot of times sustainability itself is a very broad word, so we need to have our focus. So there's two areas that we invest in. So one, which is textile, is a word pun. So as I said, our legacy started from the textile industry. So we kind of transformed that into an intersection of technology and lifestyle. So textile, if you get it, the word pun there. But fashion, textile is one of our industries that we look at. And then second is the food and agri-tech. So as we believe, a lot of the consumer industries, and two notable ones that, I've just shared, a lot of the traditional practices may not be the most sustainable. And we're talking about the entire value chain from up to downstream. And I'm sure, the more downstream fashion waste, Hannah in the minute will share a lot more. But along the whole value chain, we're talking about, say, from the materials used and selected to dyeing processes that could be very polluting to oceans, to manufacturing processes that could be, we may be, talking about when you say ESG, the social part, there could be some exploitation in labor, etc. So we look into a lot of these challenges, majorly, I think for our fund, we look into that kind of the sustainability, environmental challenges, but we also, take very much care into who we invest in. So as you can hear by now, the fashion industry is probably one of the most polluting. So we're hoping to find real innovations that could make the systemic positive change in order to, for us all to the way we produce and consume and live with the planet in mind. So that kind of summarizes what an impact fund does. We look into commercial returns, but as much as we care about the impact, and we do want to make a systemic change in the two industries. So that's in a nutshell. Thank you, Carol.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Cintia. And I think this is a great segue to then go on to Hannah, Hannah from Redress, so an NGO specializing actually in the fashion wastage part. So I'll pass that over to you right now, Hannah.
Okay, thank you. So yeah, my name's Hannah, and I've been working at Redress now for nearly 10 years. My background before that was sustainability communications from the agency side. So a lot of the work that we have done over the years, I mean, mirroring what Andrew said about, 15 years ago when Redress started up, it was mainly around trying to knock educational, kind of trying to tell people what the issues are, not really much change in terms of actually behavioral change or working in partnership like we're seeing now, which is really exciting. And waste is a big focus of us, largely because we just saw at that point there was a huge opportunity. Now it's being talked about a lot more, of course, but with 100 billion new products being made each year, and around 25% of those never even being sold, waste is such a lost financial opportunity. There's around about, I think it's about $500 billion worth of lost materials just from the production of clothing. And then you look at inventory waste and industry cut and sew waste, it's everywhere basically. So it's quite an exciting area to be in, particularly at the moment, with the rise of focus on sustainability. This is where we see a huge opportunity, particularly, the fact that if you cut waste, you automatically then cut carbon and water pollution and all those other areas. So that's largely where we focus, and our programs are largely in Hong Kong, but we also have an international design competition. So we do lots of educational programs at all levels of education. We work with the community, we work with industry to kind of collaborate on change, do partnerships for design collections. We're working with universities to try and change curriculum, all sorts of things around sort of looking at the fashion industry and its impact. So yeah, that's us.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Hannah. And I think it's great that we're talking about education. So upcoming, we have the Director of Hong Kong Social Impact and Innovation Initiatives, Mr. Kalmond Ma. So perhaps do give us a bit of an overview of what's happening on your end. What are the initiatives and what do you guys do?
Sure. Hi, everybody. Thank you for having me. Well, I have to declare that I'm not an academia, but I do work for the Rustandy Center for Social Sector Innovation at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business. As you can see in my background, this is our beautiful campus in Mount David, up Kennedy town. So maybe a bit about the Rustandy Center. I just joined in November, so I'm quite new, but Rustandy Center in Hong Kong, it is a social impact hub at the University of Chicago Booth School of Business for people committing to tackling very complex social and environmental problems. It is also an important part of the university's social impact ecosystem. It works to promote all sorts of social innovation, advance social researches, and develop the people and practices that can accelerate social change. So we run a lot of programs to provide resources and other support, basically to Hong Kong's NGOs, their leaders, and social entrepreneurs to do their best work. We offer a range of opportunities like scholarships. We do sponsor NGO EMBA scholarships annually, thanks to the support of the Hong Kong Jockey Club Charities Trust. And we also support social entrepreneurship workshops and trainings for NGO leaderships and board of directors. On a day-to-day basis, we organize a lot of events as well. One is called the Social Impact Leadership Series. So it's a short event. We talk about recent social issues. For example, from how talking different accent in English would create different kind of social prejudice. To something like how we can use artificial intelligence to promote social good. So apart from those short events, we also run our annual conferences. It's called the Onboard. So basically helping NGO leaders to do their work better. And we launch the Global Launchpad also to support social enterprises to scale up their operation, make the operation bigger, and so does the social impact that they can bring out. And also scaling nonprofit ventures is another program that we deep dive with the NGO leaders. Sometimes it's less than 10, and we go through a very intensive program so that, we talk about capacity building for the leadership and see how they can build more effective strategy going forward. A little bit of my personal background. I study environmental science, and since then I have been working in different NGO, whether they are social or environmental. And I personally witnessed how Hong Kong moved from, when we talk about environmental protection in the 90s, it would be recycling paper or newspaper cans and, all sorts of resources like plastic, to a point when the chief executive then, Dong Chi-Hua, talked about sustainable development, that, a lot of the businesses, they started to think about how in the business world, can we move on this business advantage other than, just organizing beach cleanup or tree planting for their employees back 15, 20 years ago. And part of my professional development also involved working for a sustainability consultancy. And I worked with these local or global conglomerates to develop 5-year or 10-year sustainability strategies. So I'm actually seeing how businesses, they put very serious effort in planning their business frontline with sustainability consideration. So this is actually a very interesting and very crucial time that we talk about this topic. Well, I think I'll stop here, and thank you for having me again. Look forward to sharing more with my fellow panelists.
Perfect. I think this is a great place, and I welcome all the panelists with all your varying amounts of expertise in this space. So we're going to get right into the meat of things, which is what are currently some of the challenges in implementing, social impact initiatives within your particular realm. And feel free to jump in when certain panelists say something. We have a more casual flowing situation as we did on the pre-panels. So maybe we first start off with Cintia. So we briefly talked about this. I'd love to get into it. What are the challenges right now, especially coming from the mills itself? We talk about, the profitability and sustainability. How are you looking at this? And it'd be great for your input on this.
Well, there's challenges everywhere, right? But I think, speaking from an investment's point of view, just like any VCs, I think deal sourcing and due diligence it takes a lot of time and effort. So I'm sure many VCs could, share the same, but, kind of finding the right deals and being able to kind of get into the nitty-gritties of really understanding the commercial aspect as well as the impact aspect of the model, of the business model. It's not easy. I think the Pandora's box here, I'm going to throw at everybody, is the kind of social impact measurements and metrics, because as we all know, right, if we talk about commercial returns, easy, is quantifiable. You have a robust team that could help you with the due diligence. You're able to forecast, all that is math. So commercial due diligence is always there and people get it. Whereas, when we talk about impact due diligence, however, nowadays, and that's the same for across any sectors. Now, today and tonight, I think we have a great panel with different sectors, people from, of course, from the academia, but you're with the NGOs, and then we have the social business and more. So I think we do align. There's one point there that social impact measurement is not the easiest, because we currently do not have a standard on it. However, it is also crucial should we want to scale impact investment of funds, because at the end of the day we need accountability. What makes something impactful? Investors and investees, neither have the best answer for you. It's always a conversations between investor and investee to have, because I think there are certain expectations and requirements from like a specific fund, from a specific investor, whereas like to the startup side, whether they have the resource to kind of support that kind of effort operationally on drawing these data, making the analysis, having that clear impact thesis. I mean, as a very basic, I think any impactful startup should have their own impact narrative. Now, that's very basic. Now, maybe Kalmond later on could share a little bit more on the theory of change side. However, you could go very robust and talk about SROI, but then Andrew could share, it's also a very expensive exercise. So, being able to kind of strike the balance between what is needed, what is kind of the conversation we need, how could we drive that transparency and accountability, is definitely a challenge. So I would love to kind of also kind of share the same with the other panelists and see kind of what you guys think on that as well.
Yeah, I think Andrew was talking about definitely what kind of KPIs do you hold, social enterprises or even SMEs into, ESG criteria seem like it's only for the big guys, right? I think maybe Andrew, you can share a little bit more on your thoughts on that.
Sure. I think in the social enterprise community, I think a lot of us are still at the SME or startup level. What we do observe is there seems to be some perception gap or some actual gap is around where in the majority of the industry, where I also looking into Hong Kong business, where SME is the probably around 70% of what the business are, people are still asking like how ESG is relevant to them. And also seems like ESG is the listed companies or high net worth people's game in that sense. We have like friends opening up just a restaurant, like what is the most ESG I could do, right? The owner was asking, right? Maybe at most I can do is having more environmental friendly cutleries right now with all the delivery going around and stuff like that. But that actually going to cost them a lot in terms of their operation costs. So how does ESG coming down is to make sense with the business operation as well. In relation as well for us in terms of impact startups, when we have conversation with impact investors, I think what we start to realize after, you know, in the I won't say painful, but really it's beneficial also the due diligence process, because it does help us to level up, you know, from a startup point of view, the service standard or the kind of matrix that we'll start looking into seriously of that. But what we start to realize is there is also a perception gap among investment with impact and also investment for impact, which I think, please correct me if I'm wrong, but out there in the industry, what we do see majority are still investment with impact. Primarily at the end day, the ROI from the investment need to kind of make sense or need to fit certain profile. However, a lot of impact startup or business, they are impact investment itself. The entrepreneur are impact investor. I would also strongly argue that, because for us, we are investing with our life, and time is the most precious asset for everybody. Everybody has 24 hours a day, right? So it's a choice, it's a conscious choice, but also at the same time, it's a very valuable investment. And that is investment from our perspective is for impact. So how do we have that matching matrix? When I give you one solid example is recently we experienced, we have an intern and also part-time employment with an autistic person. He is very talented. He's doing 3D modeling on our farms. However, he used very little time to finish his job, right? But to brief the same talent or the same level of job with a autistic person, it's going to take twice of the time, but also along the way with a lot of social part of the communication with colleagues and relationship. But for us, we see the value of that transformation for him to be working with us. However, if I measure it purely from an ROI, from a efficiency point of view, with probably from a for-profit business entirely, I would not have chosen that path. But for social enterprise, this is something that we're willing to take it on. However, it is hurting, it will hurt into the bottom line in the long run. It will hurt in terms of the financial metrics in a way, right? Unless we find other ways to commercialize or in a way turn that into an opportunity, but that takes time in terms of training. Yeah, so all in all is when we look into the metrics or KPIs, how do we have this aligned alignment with the investor? It's such that we are actually bearing certain environment costs, social costs inherently built into the business, and give us a fair valuation on that. I think that is some conversation that we're happy to have and feedback as well. Yeah.
I think for sure, I feel like this will connect really well into our other two panelists and what they talk about, because obviously when we spoke at the pre-panel meeting, Hannah, we're talking about, you know, some parts of the companies, right? How the NGO Redress actually helps these companies, given that there's so many different challenges. And I think Andrew is just one part of it, and it's very specific to, you know, the social enterprise side of things. How are you seeing these challenges being manifested in companies across levels and across sizes as well? Perhaps you can give us a little bit more understanding on that.
Yeah, well, I think, I mean, it's inevitable that it's very difficult for startups and SMEs to actually get on board with ESG, because if you look at the size of the teams that these big companies are throwing at this, I mean, the sustainability teams in you know, companies like Caring or VF, they're enormous. The amount of people involved in creating change, you know, positive change in different parts of the supply chain and training and all sorts of things. So it's incredibly difficult. And it's one of those things, like, as soon as you open that can, you know, you start to look at your water impacts, and then you find out incredibly complex things about your supply chain, because fashion is hugely fragmented. And, you know, even looking at some of the big players who are communicating, they're only getting to their first, second tier suppliers. And because of transparency is just not there, like the traceability of your products, of, you know, the farmer through to where it's dyed, the mills, where it's spun, and then eventually where it gets made. You know, if you're looking at somewhere like Indonesia, the factories themselves are like spread across different islands, and, you know, it's very, very difficult to control and so therefore report. So I mean, from a redress charity perspective, we're not involved in sort of that level of deep reporting. Like, our focus is more about sort of entire workforce engagement, right? And I think that's the key here, is that the more people who understand what a circular economy is, the more people that understand, you know, the sustainability of fashion, you know, the environmental issues of fashion, the more you have a collected kind of engaged workforce that can make informed decisions in their day-to-day and to improve the product. And you can't do that just in a, you know, one person sustainability team if you're an SME. So for us, it's about that general awareness and kind of training teams and making sure, largely through our Redress Design Award, this is that the next generation of fashion designers and fashion professionals are entering the industry with this kind of skill bank to be able to kind of move that change. But in terms of the reporting, the communicating side, I mean, the biggest challenge that we see is just a lack of knowledge around how to talk about this, right? This is why there's so much greenwashing. It's not intentional necessarily. It's just because marketers are thrown a sort of, we need to be doing something in this area, and they don't know how. And so stuff gets thrown out that isn't ready, and then it opens up companies to a huge amount of negative attention or feedback, and then it makes it all worse, and nobody wants to address anything. So it's a sort of circle of challenges. And then particularly, I mean, if you look at the circular economy, for example, globally, I think around 9% of the economy is circular. But when you look at fashion, it's less than 1%. So we're really behind. You know, there's a huge lag in that. And I think that's largely because of a lack of investment at the beginning and end of life. So looking at recycling investment, more money needs to be put into the technology for recycling, so that we're not relying on virgin materials and, you know, that are going to be affected by climate change and all the sort of external factors. You know, we need to be creating those systems, and it just needs more investment. So
thank you for that. I think that's actually highlighting what the education part really has to do with it. And I think with what the Rustandy Center is coming through with a lot of your leadership talks, how are you seeing addressing, I guess, these challenges as well? What are you seeing that's happening across the board with just now, you know, we had these challenges raised up. How's the education system actually keeping up with this in order to help all the companies coming forward?
Well, a little bit back to what the Rustandy Center does in Hong Kong is that, you know, we see that there is a gap in terms of the capacity of the NGO practitioners to really strategize for their action. These NGO leaders, they are actually working very closely to fill the social or environmental gaps in Hong Kong or in the region. But the point is they are usually under-resourced. and then they are overloaded with a lot of issues to solve. So I think one thing that I really want to focus on my discussion point is how we can build up more effective partnerships, because it's also talk about, when we talk about ESG or CSR, a lot of times these companies, they would, in the old times, donate a bunch of money for a good cause, and then they consider the good thing done, right? But nowadays, I think it is different, because a lot of these corporations, they are having a very strong or stronger sense of corporate citizenship, that they, well, not only do not want to be part of the problem, they want to be proactively to be part of the solution. And as a business entity, they cannot really focus a lot on social innovation. And that is a time when partnership comes into beauty, that they can partner with these NGOs who are at the front line of delivering social or environmental solutions. But I also agree with Hannah that, a lot of times these NGOs or even the social enterprises, they cannot communicate effectively. They cannot tell a good story. So I think, there is a lot of space that, for example, communication experts in PR agencies or other marketing agencies can actually help not only to the operation of the NGOs, but how they tell effectively to their stakeholders about the work that they are doing. And for example, if we go back to the topic of ESG, I think it is the same, because still, there are pioneers who are willing to invest more money, resources, time on ESG infrastructure. But at the end of the day, I so-called them the hardware, whether they have the strategies or the policy in place, it is important. But at the other side of the story is how you can engage your internal staff to embrace your ideas and to work towards your vision to actually put things into action. If you have a great strategy for 5 years or 10 years, but then you don't have the buy-in from your leadership team or your operational team, it is just empty talks, right? So I think we really have to find the sweet spot that all these level of people, whether they are from the commercial world or from the nonprofit side, to work together towards a bigger common goal.
Thanks for that, Kalmond. And I think this leads directly onto, our last and final question for this webinar series is, what more can we do? What more can we help? And what more kind of initiatives we're hoping to see in the future in order to improve our ESG understanding and also to increase, I think, companies participating in this very, very massive undertaking. I think maybe we will start off perhaps reversing down the line. Maybe Hannah, you can give us a little bit of insight on that.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I'd love to see more joint investment in the solution. So these big companies to actually not just sort of put a sticking plaster on, like Kalmond was saying, but like really investing in the solutions with their manufacturers, with the mills that they're working with, and really collectively trying to change these issues. I think we're seeing, I think also one of the things I really want to see more of, and we are getting more interested in this, is this shifting of what it means to be a fashion brand or retailer, and the different service models that you can bring into that. We're seeing a lot more rental or take back or, reselling of secondhand, and the benefits that can bring to, consumer loyalty and making products that people actually want to live with for the rest of their lives. That extending the life of the garment is super critical in terms of our mission of fabric waste, but also in terms of sustainability in the long run. So yeah, I think and more investment at that recycling. It's coming, but it's not quick enough. It takes a long time.
Well, maybe I'll move to Cintia with that, because I know they're doing a lot of investments coming through with social impact. What more do you what kind of same question to you, what kind of initiatives do you want to see in the future, or what kind of changes and impacts we can create in order to boost up this awareness?
Yeah, I think, digesting from, tonight's panelists, I think my thought here is that I completely agree with what Kalmond said, that we definitely need to drive more collaborations cross sectors to drive any systemic change. There is no one company or organization that could really, make the biggest systemic change that we wish to see. So we really need to kind of work together on that. So, I mean, as an investor or an investment kind of body, what I would love to kind of see is to kind of increase that awareness of all the different types of impact finances and financial vehicles and designs that could support impact. So what I mean by that is, I guess, social impacts come in all shapes and sizes. It happens across different sectors. There is never the best answer to anything, but we need to kind of have that awareness of what type of impact finances there are that could finance impact initiatives, impact ventures, startups, social enterprises, and NGOs. When Andrew, you said the difference between investing for impact or investing with impact. It is the subtle difference between venture philanthropy and impact investment, right? But even on impact investment or investing, there's the whole spectrum of mindsets that I think any investor should have, which is, yes, we are very familiar with the very traditional way of investment. The one major KPI is the commercial aspect, and then kind of the returns you get from the investment. Then moving down, I come the next step to the spectrum of impact finance, which is sustainable, responsible investment, taking into account the ESG risks that, that your investment are not going to companies and startups that are creating negative impact, at least, these things that are firearms and things that, you personally, with your personal values, you don't agree with, that's something that you can do as an individual investor, right? And then next is the sustainable investment. So, the ESG opportunities, really thinking about your whole portfolio, where, you could really invest with every single dollar, knowing that that is going to somewhere that would give you some positive return, not just commercial, but environmental. So maybe in carbon footprints, waste reductions, and things like that. Then you go into impact investment, which you really are, going to more risk-taking, but looking for innovations that are really making the really significant systemic change. So, along the spectrum of impact finance, I think having that as a source of awareness as an individual investor, as an institutional investor, or even as any across sector, if you need that finance and capital and funds to support your impact initiatives, knowing what is available in the market and how you could make that change with your dollar, I think could come up, could be like really impactful for any of us across the sectors. So I think, just that awareness would be really crucial, I think, in the next at least 3 to 5 or 10 years time. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Cintia. And I guess the final one, panelists, what would you like to see? What kind of help and initiatives would you like to see for social enterprises in order to, really come on board with this ESG massive undertaking?
Indeed. Well, I'm really lucky benefiting from, I think, earlier life, we're sitting from the capital angle, looking in terms of sustainable development services, implementation, and then now actually on the other end of the spectrum, looking for capital. Interestingly, that somehow the two bridge ends, there seems still a little bit alignment challenge there. I think for ESG, when onset, very likely the way that ESG came about is a little bit more towards the risk management as it started in terms of investment portfolio, because the world has changed, transformed. I do see the opportunity there as it's moving more and more towards return opportunity. And because end consumer have changed. We are in a new generation, which we are not, the new generation is not satisfied with status quo. And they demand for that change. And I think that is also the confidence or the encouragement I'd like to give to every one of us. We need to, I think, communicate that effectively, echoing what Kalmond mentioned is we do not want the status quo, and it is not okay to just do business as usual anymore, right? And I think on that front, I do hope to see when one day we would start not talking so much about how ESG itself matters, but ESG is a mean to achieving what our planet needs. So when compared to planet and community, ESG actually don't really matter that much. But what really matters is our planet, which is our community. And I think ESG is currently a tool for achieving that. So I would really want to share about this point of view with everyone. Yeah.
Thank you for that, Andrew. Is there anyone else who would like to, add on a few words towards what Andrew just spoke of?
Yeah, I do want to echo what Andrew talked about, because when people talk about ESG or CSR initiative, they are only, well, some of them maybe, they are only thinking companies that are reporting cost savings from sustainability initiative, for example, energy savings or manufacturing efficiencies. But then far fewer communicate how sustainability initiatives are actually driving growth and revenue generation. That is beyond, short-term vision, or improving key metrics such as the employee recruitment, retention, or productivity. I think people need to really look beyond ESG as a non-financial or non-material issue, but then, how they can actually weave in, as Andrew said, it is not only a tool, but then it would be more like a vision or a DNA in your business model that you have to live with.
Thank you for that, Kalmond. I mean, as a financial company, what we are very excited about as well is if one day we can actually track these measurements and give the investors a better tool set to invest into their own values. So as you say, right now we can only offer listed companies with their metrics and their reporting standards to the investors to put their money into it, right? But when we look at the broader picture of what these companies are actually doing in terms of pushing forward sustainable development and social impact, if only we could somehow channel that and channel their money into all these great initiatives as well, putting the money where your mouth is at and where your heart is at, I think that would be something great and something that I would be also looking forward to seeing. Perfect. So on that note, what we're going to do right now is we still have 9 minutes left of the webinar series. Time does pass very quickly when we're having fun. So I'm going to open the floor for questions from all of our listeners and audiences here. So feel free to either hit that little question button and submit your questions there. We can also see you on the chat as well. So we have some questions coming through first. Is economic returns a binary opposition to sustainability? Who would like to take this question?
Gosh, well, I mean, from a fashion industry perspective, we're looking at the fact that it's still growth is still the main objective, right? And it does seem incredibly binary to look at that in terms of sustainability. But I think what's exciting for us is that there's a lot of initiatives that are proving that you can both have growth and have fantastic, sustainability returns. So I think, yeah, if you'd have asked me that question a few years ago, I'd have said, yes, definitely. But now there's a lot of interesting business models that are cropping up that are showing that the two can be intertwined.
Great. I think I maybe like Cintia might echo that sentiment as well.
No, I think that kind of explains why the Fabrica Fund is here, right? No, we believe in there is commercial returns and social returns in the investment we make. So, just an example of startups that we invest in. So, for example, there's a startup that as Hannah shared, we do have a big challenge in fashion and textile waste, and tons and tons of textile waste land up in a landfill, and that's a really huge challenge. So one of our startups actually tackles that by using hydrothermal processing and turn the textile waste back into virgin materials. So that's already itself is a circular solution that is completely scalable, and with a lot of there's a lot of commercial prospect to that, because I think a lot of fashion and particularly fast fashion companies are in heavy demand of these solutions. And then the second, another that turns methane gas into polymer. So actually that could be turned into biodegradable alternative sustainable packaging. So as we know, right, methane gas is one of the emissions that we don't wish to see too much of. But then this startup actually turned something that we thought was waste into an asset. So again, these solutions and innovations are ones that we make investment in, and would be it both sides, environmental returns as well as commercial returns, we strongly believe in. So on that question, I think I'm a strong no.
Great. Okay, so we have a next question. This one's quite an interesting one. How can a startup or SME start on this journey? Where can we start? I think maybe Kalmond and Andrew can take this question, because it would be interesting to discover this on the part of what are you doing right now, Andrew, to track, I guess, your social impact indices, and from Kalmond's side, how are you consulting different companies, maybe startups from SME, how they can start with their own journey on social impact?
Sure. In fact, actually, we're integrating that with our corporate client as well. Because what we realized that the way we are tracking our output and also leading towards the outcome actually align a lot with their ESG strategy as well in long run. So we're building up that metrics and data as well as, I think data is really, really important. That is where probably a lot of startups struggle with resources or investment, but that is something I do encourage all startups, anyone, or even starting a project, to keep very careful measurements, because nothing measured, nothing managed, right? So the way we're looking at is we're not satisfied with just output in terms of kg of veggie that is grown, number of hours of engagement. Of course, these are great in terms of numbers, but at the same time, we look at what have changed in terms of perception. When the corporate stakeholders, when they are involved or participate in terms of that experience, have their perception about the food system, the importance of local supply, the importance of decarbonizing our urbanized areas, whether all these important changes, and then leading towards the lifestyle is where how Rooftop Republic, or even through an initiative or community farms, can help each one of them build a more sustainable lifestyle when they return to their homes or when they are in the office. Are they able to put that practice and then be connected to the local NGOs or other communities as well? So this is really tracking through that journey of change, individual change, team change, organization change. Yeah, so that is some approach that we have taken.
Perfect. Thank you for that, Andrew. Kalmond, do you have anything to input in terms of how can a startup or SME begin their ESG journey?
Well, there can be a very simple common formula that everybody can think about when they want to get started. First of all, they have to review their data. They always, how big or small their operation is, they always have that data either on environmental or social performance. Simple as, how many kilowatts of electricity you do in your production, how many percentage of handicapped people you employ, for example. And then, you have that data, you review it, and then you try to benchmark with your industry peers. You talk to your stakeholders, whether they are your customers, whether they are your shareholders, whether they are your employees. And then, you start to think of ways to engage these stakeholders. And you start to prioritize your business operations, whether you want to focus it on finance or operation, or whether you want to build on people's capacity, or you want to build on your company or your brand's reputation. And then you can map your ambition, whether you just want to comply, or you want to compete with your industry peers, or you want to be the leader in that space. Right? And then I think at the end of the day, after more talking and soul searching and researches, you will have your building blocks for your own strategy. And that is how you internalize your strategy and work it out.
I think that's some great advice over there as well. I mean, for sure, what we're trying to do at AQUMON, we only recently established our own ESG committee back in January. And what we're doing is we're actually riding along our landlord, Swire's, ESG impact. So, you know, they have these green pledges, and as this is such a starting point for us, you know, we actually have just a very small team dedicated to sustainability initiatives. So what we do is we are starting to track our electricity, as you were saying. It is about data and metrics. We're starting to track how many female employees we have, how many female investors we have. You know, is that ratio increasing? Because we're trying to increase diversity, and ultimately, you know, we're trying to get financial inclusion, which is under the UN SDG, is one of those things. You know, financial inclusion, giving more accessibility to different people on their financial health. So I think for sure, if you do not have the resources yet to go full on, from AQUMON's point of view, see what existing resources are already available to ride alongside, right? Until you can actually separate it out and break out into your own module. So I think that's time for us today. Thank you so much, our lovely, lovely panelists, for joining us. And I hope this has been a very interesting conversation. It's by no means just like a stop pin at this moment. It's an ongoing conversation that needs to happen so that we see progress in the movement altogether. And you can find all of our panelists on their LinkedIn as well. If there are any further questions, you can always feel free to reach out to any one of them. And once again, thank you on behalf of AQUMON for joining us.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right. Catch you soon. Have a lovely evening.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye.